The Orion research station hovered at the edge of the Xenon 22 system. Its empty corridors echoed with the constant hum of containment engines. Dr. Freya Kroc adjusted the sensors for the 10th time that hour, her eyes fixed on the pulsating anomaly beyond the shielded windows, a young black hole catalogued as V726, whose mass warped spacetime in unpredictable ways. Previous reports mentioned whispering sounds picked up by probes, low-frequency vibrations that algorithms translated into almost linguistic patterns. She traced her fingers across the holographic screen, projecting graphs that oscillated in sync with the entity's heartbeat. Then she heard the first snap, a metallic click from the sample lab, followed by the sharp smell of burnt ozone. When she turned, the sealed door was slightly ajar, though security logs showed no one entering or leaving in the last 6 hours. The communications room glowed amber. Monitors flickered in irregular Morse code. Eduardo, the systems engineer, was hunched over the main console, his hands trembling as he adjusted the receivers. "It's not interference," he muttered without looking at her. "It's responding." Freya approached, noticing that the raw transmission data formed repetitive sequences, like a distorted echo of her own words during previous transmissions. Suddenly, the audio system emitted a deep sound, a sustained note that vibrated in her bones. Eduardo fell to his knees, clutching his ears, but Freya remained still, realizing the frequency matched the resonance of a Gregorian chant her grandmother used to sing. The central monitor lit up, displaying a grainy image, a humanoid silhouette, yet faceless, standing in the decompression chamber. The timestamp showed the footage was live. In the infirmary, Julia's body floated in a stasis tank, limbs twisted at impossible angles. The biologist had collapsed during data collection. Her skeleton was reorganizing into a symmetrical, but non-human, structure. Dr. Kroc spent hours analyzing tissue samples, finding traces of elements not present in any database. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the ventilation system stopped, and the air grew thick with the smell of rust and something organic, like roasted meat. She rushed to the corridor only to find Eduardo standing before the observation portal, his eyes white as marble. "It wants to talk," he said, his voice splitting into 2 tones, as if 2 people were speaking in unison. Behind him, the anomaly had expanded, its edge swallowed nearby stars, undulating like a living membrane. Freya felt something touch her nape, not a hand, but the absence of pressure, as if the space around her had been sucked into a vacuum. The Orion's log records abruptly end at 4:47 with a final entry written in characters that fade into ink smudges at the edges of the paper. A partial transcript mentions conversations with the void and the grammar of darkness. The rescue vessel sent 3 weeks later found the station intact but empty, with all systems operating normally. In the meeting room, a stack of printed sheets detailed equations describing the conversion of matter into pure information, signed by Freya and Eduardo. The last page, scrawled in a trembling hand, contained a single sentence: "We have become the translation." Today, amateur astronomers claim V726 emits a faint but constant signal at 117 Hz, the same frequency as the human brain in a state of deep fear. The rescue ship, the Daedalus, floated 50 kilometers from Orion, its headlights slicing through the darkness as Commander Iria Noir adjusted the external sensors. The station's emergency transmission had abruptly ceased 37 minutes prior, replaced by a white noise that resembled old television static. "Normal thermal readings," said pilot Jared, scratching his neck, tattooed with Nordic runes. "No structural damage." Iria frowned, observing the station's image on the monitor. Intact, but with internal lights flickering at irregular intervals, like a fibrillation heart. She ordered the launch of a probe that returned with contradictory data. A stable atmosphere, yet with traces of unknown compounds, similar to pheromones of social insects. Upon docking, the smell of ozone greeted them, stronger near the communications room, where monitors still displayed the same loop of prime numbers. Jared was the first to notice the drawings on the decompression chamber walls. Geometric spirals made of a viscous, black substance that glowed under artificial light. "This wasn't in the transmissions," he whispered, rubbing a fragment between his fingers. The substance clung to his glove, spreading like living ink before evaporating. Iria moved to the infirmary, finding the stasis tank empty except for a silvery film on the bottom, which contracted when touched. In the next corridor, they heard muffled voices coming from the meeting room. Entering, they saw Freya and Eduardo seated at the table, motionless, their faces covered by a crystalline layer that reflected light like diamonds. Between them, A hologram slowly rotated. A 3D representation of V726 now enveloped by golden lines resembling neural circuits. At 9 o'clock that night, the Daedalus communication system emitted an alarm. Iria rushed to the bridge, finding Jared hunched over the controls, his eyes wide. "The ship is responding," he said, his voice failing. The engines had activated without command, and the computer displayed a pre-programmed route directly to V726 event horizon. Before they could react, the lights went out, and a vibration ran through the floor, accompanied by a chorus of whispering voices in dead languages. Iria tried to access the emergency manual, but the physical book pages crumbled in her hands, turning to ash that formed patterns similar to the station's drawings. On the opposite wall, a figure began to materialize. The same faceless humanoid silhouette, now outlined by thousands of luminous points, like trapped stars. The last thing Jared recorded in his log was the sensation of being observed, not by eyes, but by absences, holes in the air that absorbed the surrounding light. He wrote about how the figure extended a long limb, touching the ship's hull, and how the metal melted like wax, molding into new shapes. "It's not an attack," he scrawled in blurred ink. "It's a conversation." Subsequently recovered audio logs show that in the final minutes, the 117 Hz frequency synchronized with the crew's heartbeats, while overlapping voices repeated, "Translate yourselves." The Daedalus was found 6 months later orbiting V726 on a perfect trajectory, with all systems functioning, but without any sign of life, except for a single hologram on the bridge. A pulsating black sphere, surrounded by equations describing the conversion of consciousness into dark matter. Earth received the first signal 3 weeks after the Daedalus disappeared. An observatory in Chile picked up radio bursts at 117 Hz, echoing in patterns that matched the beats of a human heart. Dr. Serafina Rojas, an astrophysicist specializing in high-energy phenomena, was assigned to analyze the data. In her lab, the oscillations formed a sequence resembling Morse code, but when translated, it resulted in fragments of poetry in archaic Latin. "The darkness is not empty," one line repeated. "It listens." Serafina spent nights adjusting algorithms until a simulation revealed something disturbing. The transmissions weren't coming from V726, but from within the solar system, reflected by Jupiter's magnetosphere. The next morning, during a team meeting, Serafina's assistant, Milo, entered the room with a pale expression. He carried a tablet displaying images from the space telescope showing a dark spot expanding near Mars' orbit. Not an object, but a region of space where light seemed to be swallowed in spirals. As they discussed, the lab's lighting system failed, plunging the room into dimness. That's when they heard the first whisper, not through speakers, but within their own heads, a voice that sounded like Freya and Eduardo speaking in unison. "You have already been translated." Milo fell to the floor convulsing, his veins glowing an electric blue, like exposed circuits. At midnight, Serafina decided to inject the signal into a virtual reality simulator to visualize its structure. The program collapsed within seconds, but before doing so, it projected a fleeting image, a network of black filaments connecting all points where the anomaly had been detected, including Earth itself. Horrified, she realized the network's nodes coincided with mass extinction events in prehistory. Before she could share the discovery, the lab's security system locked all exits. Screens began displaying looping videos. People around the world paralyzed in strange postures, their bodies covered by the same viscous substance from the Orion walls. One was Serafina's 6-year-old daughter, smiling at the camera, as her skin transformed into a crystalline layer. In her final journal entry, written with a pen that bled black ink onto the following pages, Serafina described how the darkness entered the lab window, not as an absence of light, but as a presence that enveloped her right arm. She felt information being transferred to her mind, equations, memories of Freya, the smell of ozone, her grandmother's singing voice. Just before losing consciousness, she understood that V726 wasn't a black hole, but a kind of mind using the structure of spacetime as language. The last line, scrawled in almost illegible script, read, "We are the grammar. We are the translation." Today, satellites still detect the network of filaments, now extending to the moon's orbit. Some claim that if you tune a radio to the depths of the ocean, you'll hear children whispering in languages that don't exist, as the darkness draws near, not to destroy, but to rewrite.